Hi everyone, welcome to Ballroom B. My name is Philip Chia and I am the product marketing manager at Tulip, and I'll be the MC today. So today we are at the last session for life sciences audience. We'll be moderated by Dan Matlis, and along with our other panelists, which will get a nice introduction later. Just want to let you all know that we'll have time for a Q&A at the end. And then at 3:30, outside will become a life sciences mixer. So feel free to enjoy a nice chat with peers, colleagues, meet someone new, speak with our panelists if you can get time with them. So looking forward to our last session. Dan?
Excellent. Thank you, Philip. Much appreciated. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Dan Matlis, and I'm with a firm called Axendia. We are an analyst firm focused on the life sciences industry. We advise industry companies, technology, and service providers at the intersection of business, technology, and regulatory issues that impact life science organizations. We've also worked with FDA on a number of transformational initiatives. I mentioned a little bit earlier, we've worked with FDA on computer software assurance for the last 5 years, so we understand what the thinking is. And just very quickly, from a personal standpoint, I started my career at Johnson & Johnson 34 years ago as an automation and controls engineer. So actually wrote a custom computer integrated manufacturing system. That's what MES was called before it was MES. So I've been around working, and I really have some of the scars to show how we overcame some of the challenges. And what we want to do with this session is really talk about that. We heard a lot of success stories today, which is wonderful. When you get there, it feels great. But in order to get there, there are realities and challenges that we need to overcome. And what we'd like to do today is talk through some of those. So hopefully you can learn from others' mistakes and you don't have to make them yourself. So that's a little bit of a setup on myself and the session. And then I'll ask each one of the panelists to introduce themselves quickly to give us a little bit of background and experience.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today, and thank you for your time. My name is Dharmesh Ved. I'm part of ZS Associates. We are a consulting firm, primarily focused mostly on life science and pharma companies, about 85% of business. We have been in business about 40 plus years with 13,000 plus employees globally. That said, we also support other industries as well, whether it's industrial, automation, etc. I do bring about 25 plus years of industry experience prior to my consulting roles. Starting like Daniel, I was on a shop floor at the age of 16, working for now called Collins Aerospace, used to be B Aerospace, making passenger mask and pilot mask assembly lines while going through my engineering school and beyond. So my manufacturing is my passion. I smell the shop floor and I walk the shop floor. That's my background. That said, I'm a partner with ZS and Associates, and I lead our manufacturing vertical within supply chain manufacturing practice.
Excellent. Chris?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the invite. I'm looking forward to this panel today. So my name's Chris Kopinski. I'm the head of strategy and business development for a group we call Industry Products within AWS. For those that don't know AWS, it's a cloud computing platform that's trusted by 19 of the top 20 pharma manufacturers and 10 out of 10 medtech companies. And I have been with AWS for about 5 years, where I've led our healthcare and life sciences manufacturing vertical, business development. And background for myself, I spent my years in engineering and manufacturing started off in medtech, where I started at GE Healthcare working on MRI and med device technology. I moved over to our life sciences business, where I was part of a team that built, developed, and manufactured and implemented a turnkey factory solution called the Flex Factory. I was part of the initial first, let's say 10, but it's now a platform that's now deployed across hundreds of different manufacturing, which helps standardize an end-to-end biologic manufacturing process. And I'm based here in Boston, so it's really exciting to have this local.
Excellent. Patrick?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to be here as well. I'm Patrick Hyatt. I'm CEO and co-founder of a company called Plus Ultra. It's a semantic knowledge system based product, and we've been working on that for all of 6 months. So before that, I do have a bit more of a longer career. You can see I'm as old as these guys as well. Basically, I have a 3-decade career in GSK. So the first 10 years I was all about manufacturing and designing new products, primarily in the OSD and respiratory space. The second decade was all about putting the systems in to R&D across 8 sites to ensure that we could be more quantitative about the way that we were actually developing formulation and products and bringing them to market. Those fundamentally were SCADA systems, PAT systems, MES systems, and so on. And then last decade, I was responsible for disruptive digital innovation for parts of development as well as the global supply chain. And I led the Digital Factory initiative that was awarded in 2018 the Lighthouse. And we also my team set up the 2030 strategy and business case. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
So let's start with level setting. So Dharmesh, what is digital transformation in your opinion, and why is it important for the life sciences industry?
Thank you, Daniel. Digital transformation, what we now call it Industry 4.0 or 5.0, so to speak, now 5.0, I see as a seamless integration of your shop floor systems, which we call OT systems, horizontal OT systems, and the vertical IT systems, which is MES, ERP systems, system of records, etc., and the data flow that happens in that ecosystem. When it's all connected within the ecosystem, the outcome of this is the enabling real-time insights that the personas on the factory floor, whether it's a shop floor person, quality person, supervisor, etc., whoever, gets those insights to make key decisions, almost real-time, near real-time, we call it usually, so that they can get value or drive value, whether it's by optimization of throughput, improvement of throughput, or reduction of quality issues, etc. Any of those KPIs can be immediately taken actionable rather than after the fact, which I call it that cyber, integration of cyber systems with physical systems.
Chris, what's your definition and your take on it?
It's probably quite similar, actually, but I would go one step, maybe not further, but just to kind of accentuate a point. For me, where I see digital transformation and what I see digital transformation is it's enabling new business outcomes that you wouldn't otherwise been able to do without digital technologies. And I think it shows up in similar ways. So it shows up in being able to integrate not only your shop floor to your top floor, but also looking across new ways that you integrate across your life cycle. So bringing development to process development to engineering to manufacturing, even to commercial. I think once you start to digitally transform, you're enabling yourself to go after new outcomes that weren't otherwise been able to achieve. So we always want time to market. We always want more personalization. It's impossible to do today without digital transformation.
Yep. It really, we've been talking about the proverbial closing the loop forever.
Yeah.
Right? It really is, and the other acronym that's often used, especially in the discrete space, is PLM, right? But we really are at the stage where we can truly manage the life cycle of our products when we implement some of these technologies. Patrick, what's your perspective?
So the perspective really, I'm going to try and give a different perspective, is access to medicines really, and there being a patient at the end of this game. And so digital transformation is fundamentally about linking in with C-suite and understanding the fundamental strategy of the organization and reverse engineering the opportunities associated with this transformation to the needs of the company. And I think over the last 10 years, the fundamental needs of big pharma and life science companies have kind of subtly changed.
Yep.
I think there are the more burning platforms in terms of the things that we're trying to achieve. We need to be faster. Pipeline acceleration is really important. We need to make sure deviations are low, cost of goods are appropriate. There are many issues that we need to deal with. And we can't continue to work in the ways that we've done before. And I think certainly Big Pharma has done a lot to try and digitize, but it's about going from digitization to being digitally excellent. Yep. And it's only by taking the technologies and strategically linking them with the outcomes of the organization that really make it stick. And I think that's kind of a point that we've heard today a few times. And we were talking about Tulip, right? We're talking about a workflow engine. Well, how does that link to the C-suite, right? How is that? Surely that's just a little silo down here that's important. Well, it's not, because in most big companies, if you can save money in operations, where does it go? It goes into the pipeline. Mm-hmm. So it is strategically important to get it right. And so that would be that digital transformation is about re-engineering the way our businesses work.
Yep, I couldn't agree with you more. Very often when we talk to organizations and you ask somebody, what do you do? And the answer is, well, I'm in QA and my job is to ensure compliance, or I'm in manufacturing so I make product, or I'm in R&D so I identify new chemical entities. Well, your job is really to improve patient outcomes, to your point. Our job is to make patient outcomes better by being in quality, by identifying new chemical entities, by making product. And Patrick, you and I were talking a little bit earlier, very often the incentives are misaligned within our industry. And as a result, we hyper-focus on the little sliver of what I do and forget about the patient outcome piece. The other point I'd like to make is, I'll make a prediction, the cloud is going to be obsolete, right? I lived through mainframes and mini computers and two-tier, three-tier, web-based. So digital transformation, the digital part, is going to be obsolete. But we're moving to quantum, right? Quantum is what's next. Now, is it going to be quantum transformation? The technology is not really what's important. The technical word up front is not what's important. What's more important is the transformation that we need to do by using an enabling technology, whatever that enabling technology is best. AI is another good example. AI is not a strategy, it's a tool. You don't go to your contractor and say, build me a house with a hammer. You say, build me a house. And these are the specs for the house. Use whatever tool you need and make sure that it's available. So there's a number of transformations, to your point, that are happening within our industry. So with that in mind, Patrick, can you share a story about a successful digital transformation initiative that you were involved with? And what were the goals? What were some of the milestones that needed to be achieved? And more importantly, or just as importantly, what are the roadblocks that you faced and how did you overcome them?
So I'll give a bit of a story around the function that I led in GSK, which was a disruptive digital innovation group. It started in R&D, and it was about 2017. And the purpose of that team was to shake up the thinking within the global supply chain and development organization around the tooling that it was using. So it was the focus was on some monolithic platforms, systems of records, and we saw that there was an opportunity to look at technology to see how we can find ways to not only develop products more quantitatively, faster, but we also felt that the global supply chain could be run more efficiently. And so basically what happened is we pulled together funding, so a unique set of isolated funding for a team. This innovation team was there to go out and seek and look for opportunities and technologies. It was also there to go through a process of POC and POV. Interestingly, on this journey, and the scope was from automation all the way through to AI. I mean, a massive scope. Any digital application that could be applied to our organization to drive efficiency, productivity. And what we found, what was interesting about that is that having a set-aside amount of funding was really powerful. It gave us a lot of speed and pace. Thinking about POCing in a different way, up to that point, GSK hadn't really POC'd in that way, to ensure that we were de-risking projects up front was really critical. And then we moved into a world where we were doing less POCs and more POVs. Right. So it was all about proof of value, and getting to value really, really quickly. So we could talk, I mean, so it led to, this team led to setting a strategy initially at one site, and then that was scaled to another site in the US, originally in the UK and then to the US. Yep. But I think I mean, we can go through the success stories. I think let's talk about some of the observations of that. So one of the things that we found was really tricky is when you POV, when you have a team set out to POV, you are taking it in some situations into a GMP app, depending on the domain. And you have this real interesting dynamic between the tech organization that is doing the innovation and the tech organization that will receive. And getting the receiver to accept that technology is really difficult, right? Because they need funding as well. So one of the big challenges was to overcome that within the tech organization. So when we did the first digital factories, we were still in R&D. We then got moved into a tech organization, thinking it would solve the problem, but it didn't. So what we ended up doing is really pulling on, just to solve that challenge, really pulling on business pull. Yep. So the business in every situation, although we had funding to do the POV, although we were showing good value, it was only the business owners that accepted that technology and the business case that really helped to push the technology into scale within the tech organization. Yep. Because fundamentally the tech organization was set up to do what the tech organization had already been set up to do, not take on new technologies. So that was massive learning, right? That was one of those things that you're saying, hang on, this needs to be overcome before we move forward. So I'll cut it short. The whole idea of making sure that you're connected to strategy, having good business cases, and then having the right business people, business owners to actually pull the technology helps you get through some of those challenges with adoption and scale. So that's one of those little lessons I think we learned. It led to a World Economic Forum digital lighthouse that was scaled as well. So it was successful, but that was a key impediment if we hadn't solved that problem.
Yeah, and I agree with you completely. A lot of organizations implement new technologies by doing pilots or proof of concepts. This is where projects go to die. And the reason is because they only have funding for that proof of concept or pilot. There's no sustaining funding down the line. What you need to do, to your point, is identify what's the value that this is going to bring to my organization and find use cases where you can get to value quickly. And then it becomes viral. As we heard earlier in the earlier presentation, then people are going to come to you and say, I want to use the application in order to do this, from EDHR, from batch records to the cafeteria, right? That's how you get the adoption.
To that point, another important factor is it may not be the people that are using the application that are actually getting the value. So in certain, if you're too siloed in your digital approach and people don't understand the full translation that you're going through and transformation, if you rely too heavily on certain individuals or teams that are using the application, that can be a danger in its own right as well.
Agreed. So with that in mind, Ramesh, can you talk about some of the similarities or projects that you've seen and how you've been able to overcome some of the challenges?
Yeah, last year and a half or so, a big pharma firm, one of the biggest one, we work with top 20, but one of the biggest firm, where we wanted to start a lighthouse. We started with the value prop to begin with, to your point, and proof of value for one product line. The idea was to have control tower for manufacturing processes for one product line, and then scale it to 6 lines. But that said, the idea was looking at those KPIs, the OEE metrics. the cycle times, the quality rejects or scraps, etc. Those KPIs or kappas on one product line to see what value are they getting. For example, initially, they couldn't even see what OEE were they driving. We found out after the installation and application of this one line, they were in the low 40s. Well, world class is 85%. You have opportunity of 41%. So that's the value, as you can see here. But then we were able to scale this to their entire site now as a lighthouse, so to speak. The plan is to now scale to further other sites globally, and at the same time have some Gen AI applications on top of it as well.
That's great. Chris, what's your experience working with large and small organizations?
Preparing for this, I was thinking through all the examples, and I actually landed on one I think it's useful to think of because there's a lot of learnings that you go through when you embark on a large digital transformation initiative, and particularly this one. A little context, the group that I'm part of is a product development team that builds new products through co-development with customers. And we typically do that over the course of a 2 to 3 year period. So you're looking for companies that have a North Star, a vision, but a very significant business outcome that they're trying to achieve where only technology partners can help accelerate that because you can't do that on your own. And so this particular customer based in Europe is one of the oldest over 150-year regulated manufacturer, but also one of the higher volume manufacturers. And they're going through a transformation where they're shifting to a new product line, and the production of their existing product line continues to run into geopolitical challenges. So the Ukraine-Russia conflict shut down 12% of their top line revenue. And so essentially they were under pressure to take what was a 5-year plan and reduce it to 3-year plan. Extreme visibility for the board, and sitting in a room like this or an innovation room trying to brainstorm what can we do. Many of these problems could be solved from solutions like what Tulip offers, but what was really one of the things that came out of that challenge was how do we actually start up factories? How do we start up our capacity quicker and get our capacity ready, digitally ready faster? And so we ended up centering on a innovation around how we could better bring contextualized information from the equipment. And to put context, this equipment's a $40 million piece of equipment, 40,000 OPC UA nodes. Particularly, this company's made a lot of investment in that standard. And how do we make it so that that can be replicatable across their factories, deployed across their factories, and together we try to achieve this over 3 years. And so we're about 2.5 years on that journey, and we're deployed across 3 facilities on our way to 10, because now we've reached a point where we are moving to scale. But to get there, there's been a lot of learnings, particularly the proof of concept, proof of value. Our team looked at different ways we can go about it because it's developing new technology. We actually went right to proof of value. We had in this case, the chief operating officer was directly sponsoring it. His team was put in place to run it with digital technology, with QA, with operations on board to support. And we set out to a very specific short duration period within a factory where we weren't going to stop at proof of concept. We were actually going to deploy into a factory. We were going to collect those data points to show that we can, in this case, take what would be a 12-week process and bring it down into 1 day. Once we've done that, you can always do it once. Everyone can do it once in one factory. Moving to what would be, I'd say, a more intermediate phase. We call it the MVP phase. Now that we've proven the value, how do we actually develop the product considering the different product lines? So there's primary and secondary packaging. How do we think about the different unique use cases that will come from this data? And honestly, that's where a lot of the challenge is. So it's definitely not easy. Digital transformation is still very hard, but what we try to ground our initiatives always on is what is the outcome we're trying to enable? Does the work that we're doing either support that indirectly because it's supporting the compliance, it's supporting the quality, or is it directly showing evidence that we can get to that result? And I want to end with one point. The user of that application is not the beneficiary. They're actually the one enabling that outcome. It's their role, and they know their role. It's an important role, but they're not the ones that are actually the ones benefiting, but the business is benefiting and the patients are benefiting.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to, as we're going through digital transformation, to be willing to challenge the status quo. One of the biggest challenges that we find in our research, the top barrier to digital transformation in life science organizations is not the technology, it's the culture. And Deming said, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? The problem in our organizations is that, if you look at the regulatory guidelines, if you look at the CSV guidelines that we use today, they were written by Al Taylor and John Murray at FDA in 1999. And we're validating like it's 1999 because our quality systems are designed to meet the regulatory guidance, or worse yet, the interpretation that our quality people in 2001, and then when it was last updated in 2002, had of how you would validate a solution. And back then, we were just getting into maybe 2-tier, maybe 3-tier architectures, right? We didn't have, mobile phones.
Yeah.
And now we're trying to validate composable MES with those kinds of procedures. Now, the challenge that I always have for companies is don't tie your own two hands behind your back and blame it on the regulators, right? Very often what happens is, as an industry, we write our procedures to be so tight that they don't apply to today's technology, and then we are so surprised that it takes us, as we heard this morning, it might take us a couple of weeks to develop the app and 6 months to validate it. That's totally within our control. I know that wasn't one of the prep questions that we talked about, but from a validation and compliance standpoint, how do you suggest that companies overcome this major challenge that we have?
I think to your point earlier, first assess yourself. Do you feel comfortable?
Yeah.
And maybe there is also to challenge regulators and say, okay, look, these documents were written in 1990s. Why don't you update? Because you cannot use today's technology and fit in that box.
Yeah.
Why don't we go both ways? Have the regulatory also look into these documents and update it. At the same time, companies should assess themselves. Am I comfortable with this change?
Yep.
And then go back to regulators for approvals. To your point.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No, that's okay. Chris, what's your take? What's your experience?
You're very full of curveballs today. First one is my role will be obsolete. And now the second one is to
need
answer
to
the
look
tough regulator question.
To your next role, you need to look ahead on what's next. Make
so
your
looking
role
forward
job
to it.
obsolete.
I'll call Tulip next. So from a regulatory perspective, I'm not sure I'll answer it specifically, but I do want to give another example because we always talk about the positive outcomes of digital transformation. I actually think the failures or the learning moments are actually important for not only the team's learning, but the organizational learning that goes on with that. So similar, probably about 4 years ago, I was working with one of the top 10 pharma manufacturers, and the team had full operational support. There was budget. The team had proof of value around a solution that was essentially an innovative way to do alarm and events on the shop floor using cloud technology. The data was there, the evidence was there, the value was proven. But one of the things that the team, let's say, overlooked in that process was what was the regulators, what was the quality team, what was the compliance team going to actually think about that solution? Because it was challenging the status quo of what a solution to support the safety and the regulatory requirements they had in place could support. And I would say normally, like, well, the team should have anticipated, like hindsight's 2020, but actually it was a really important learning for the team because not only did that push the organization to have to look at new technology in a different way, it actually paved the way for their next project,
absolutely.
which was to bring a cloud-based data warehouse to the shop floor to use that data for process optimization. So I think there's learnings that you could take forward by trying things and seeing how far you can go to get your organization to learn in the process with you.
I completely agree, Patrick.
Are there early communications with the quality teams and regulatory groups as necessary? And just have good people on your team that can identify exactly the strategy in the first place.
Yep.
Right? We don't need to be told what it is. Through experience, you can know how to develop and design a series of experiments that will link to a product. And also, try not to go to full-blown validation or feedback automation. What value can you get without actually, we're still keeping the human in the loop? So where you know it's tricky, like if you're starting to use data sets and machine learning and even venturing into black box, then you can't assume that technology in the first instance is ever going to be decision making to sanction a batch. You just know that, right? You say, well, okay, how could we use this information to do a diagnostic after the fact? Potentially, how could we use it to improve performance? Or maybe how could we give this information as a secondary piece of information at shop floor for advisory? So I struggle with that question sometimes because you have systems of record, right? They're there. I think you just have to be pragmatic and not going too far if you're not absolutely confident in the way that you can control the system.
Yeah, to build on what you all mentioned, in my experience, you should never go to quality with a problem. You should go to quality with a solution. And I'll give you an example. When I implemented my first computer integrated manufacturing system on the floor, one of the requirements was that the computer needs to run on 110 volts. So I went to Hank, my quality peer, and said, what should we do? And he said, Dan, you're an electrical engineer. You have a voltmeter. You need to measure that there's 110 volts coming out of the outlet. And I said, no. And he kind of looked back and said, what do you mean no? It's a requirement. I said, give me a couple of days. I'll come back to you with a solution. And I did some research and I found out, by law in the United States, the electric company has to provide 110 volts RMS plus minus, I think it's 15%. The power supply on the PC is 80 to 240 volt self-sensing. Plus I'm going to put a UPS in front of the thing and there's always going to be 110 volts. I said, Hank, what if I put that statement in the protocol? And he said, yeah, that makes sense. And had I not done that, to this day, every engineer at J&J who plugged in a computer in the manufacturing floor would have to measure. So it's really important for us to not just take what we've heard in the past or what the quality person tells us as that's the only way. It's important for us to challenge. So with that in mind, if you knew then what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self around implementing these solutions more successfully with today's technologies?
I think first of all, as we talked before, also understanding, making sure why are we going through this digital change, transformation? What's the reason? What's the value to begin with? And it comes top down, of course. It should, because that's where the financials are also discussed, should be anyways. And then based on that, agreeing on that value and what kind of term are we looking, 3-year, 5-year, whatnot. And then bringing all the stakeholders, whether it's IT, whether it's quality, et cetera, as part of this agreement that yes, we are together in, and then build a strategic roadmap. How are we going to achieve this in this 3-year, 5-year time frame? And accordingly march with those milestones. I think that's the way to go, rather than going the other way. Oh, I have a technology, let's put it in without understanding what value it's going to give you, which has happened in the initial stages of this transformation, 2013, 14, 15 time frame.
Yep, absolutely.
That I have seen.
Chris, if you stepped into that time machine, what would you tell yourself?
If I knew then what I know now.
Yes.
I think, for me, it's a simple answer because everyone should be empowered to be able to ask the question is, how does this impact the business we're in? So how does this impact patients, or how does this impact the KPIs of our organization, the outcomes? There's those famous stats, every consultancy has it, 80%, 90%, 70% fail. There's many reasons that happens, but I think far and few between the majority I see fail because they just weren't focused on the right outcome to start off.
Absolutely. Patrick, what's?
I'll do two. I see that there's some younger ones in the audience today as well. Don't wait to lead.
Yep.
Don't wait to lead, because you've got the opportunity to transform the organizations you're in, and a lot of your leadership have not got what's in your head, and they need to know it. And sometimes you always feel there's somebody else that's their responsibility to actually remove roadblocks or set the strategy. Don't wait. It's yours to set and take the initiative. That's one piece of advice. I sound like an old man, don't I? That's really bad. But the second one is, and it was based on my experience. Like earlier on, there was a kind of initiative that I alluded to earlier that was about modernization, right? So where's the value in modernization?
Mm-hmm.
But things started to really hum once we had a proper business case to follow. There was a capital efficiency and automation challenge where we had to get the performance up of a series of lines of equipment to save about in the order of £6 million. Oh, actually, it was £20 million. So it was only after that particular situation where that problem came up, we applied the same technologies to it in a focused way and acquired that benefit, that we actually started to get a scaling. So make sure that before you set out on your digital transformation journeys, make sure that you're really clear on what the organizational impact you're trying to achieve.
Yep. So let's do a final lightning round type question. What advice would you give somebody embarking on their digital journey today? Ramesh, I'll start with you.
First of all, assess your organization to make sure are they ready to begin with. Which kind of course, apart from what value we just talked about, that hey, are we getting value? But then assess your organization in terms of its readiness. When I say readiness, change management, there's two pieces, I would think. One is adoption/buy-in. And sometimes what happens is when you go to the factory floors, it seems like these folks think, which probably are doing this work for years, who knows, they think Big Daddy is watching me. Let's be honest. It comes to you sometimes that way. Some of them feel that way. So that's one is buy-in, make sure that's not the case. And then the second piece is, upskilling the labor force. Whether it's labor force current or labor force of the future, as I feel that will definitely be a challenge going forward. So I think those are the two things you have to think when you talk about, making sure readiness of the organization. I think that is, at least in my opinion, to start with, apart from the value piece, at least for the time, at least those two. Anything else?
Excellent, Chris.
I mean, I'm going to add and be specific. I agree with you. If your organization and your leadership aren't bought in or aren't involved or engaged with it, if you're early in your career and you're really passionate about it, you should actually question if that's the right place you want to be at. I see a lot of young companies and people in young companies run into hurdles because cash is limited, time is limited, and it becomes a second or third priority. And where I see success, I mean, I was just thinking, I didn't think about this example ahead of time, but it's worth sharing. Like almost everyone in this room is familiar, you might already be part of that organization, but like what Moderna did during the pandemic, and even what they did before they were a household name, is nothing short of incredible with the amount of resources and the size of the team they had. And it's because, during that time, you could see their CEO on CNBC talking about how important it is to invest in technology.
Digital.
And so you want to make sure you're one there. But I think the other part is, and this is just my own personal experience, don't be afraid to go where the fires are. Like, don't be afraid to take on the hard role. Like, digital transformation can be a accelerator, but it also could be a place where you run into roadblocks. So if there's a real need and there's a real problem that the business needs solving, you have a tremendous skill set that you can apply to solve that with technology.
Yep. And as we heard this morning, digital transformation and process improvement go hand in hand, continuous improvement. You can't do one without the other, right?
I started my career as a Six Sigma black belt.
There you go.
I'm sure many people in this room were in that space too, and now we're using,
Those concepts.
Claude and
Yep.
ChatGPT and
I would just give one quick personal example, if I may, and that's for probably practical, actual example. This was in 2016-17 timeframe. I led a company. My title was Executive Director, Industry 4.0 implementation for 40+ sites. And I was in one of the sites for actually understanding the current processes. One of the operator and the site lead told me, "Get out of my floor. I don't want you." This is real story. I said, "Okay, thank you." I left. I could have pushed through their bosses, got him fired. No, I didn't. I left. I went next day. I talked to the supervisor again. "Can you please give me 2 hours? I just want to see your floor. And then within a month, I'll come with 3 or 4 people from my team. We'll do one of the digital transformation of your one product line to show how are you performing and what's your OE and your OLE, which is overall line efficiency. If you like it, you adopt it and you can scale it. If you like it, if you don't, we'll take it back." He gave me that opportunity. 6 or 8 months later, the POV was successful. It became a large as, by the way, the pull thing we talk about. 15+ sites globally wanted this going forward.
Yep.
So I don't have to push anymore. I got a pull. Real stuff, of course, I could have got him fired. I would have been upset. I was upset. But I said, I get it. Why? Let's see. So again, don't be afraid. Go in the fire.
Yep. Patrick, final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say try not to learn by doing, because you can learn from a lot of people. Most of what we're doing in digital translation is not IP related. So don't try and invent it yourselves. Go and join a consortium, get really good partners, talk, share, get involved in the various forums that are out there and learn from it, because it will be an accelerator.
Yep, absolutely. Let's open it up for some questions from the audience. Any questions? There's one. It's a 7-second rule. You have to wait 7 seconds and somebody will ask a question. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sydney. I'm from Tulip. And I think one of you said something along the lines of just have good people on a team. And as Tulip, we get asked occasionally, well, what sort of person should I be looking to hire to own digital transformation at my company? So what do you think makes a good person for that type of role or for that type of project?
I'll give you my opinion. I'll start by saying you need somebody who's unwilling to accept the status quo, who's comfortable challenging the status quo, because that's the only way you're going to improve.
I totally agree. And of course, passionate about what they're doing, enjoy your work and make sure you believe in it. In the end, whether or not, sooner or not, if you do it, otherwise you will get disrupted on your own. You have to be in the market. Margins are shrinking. You have no choice but to go forward sooner or later.
Curious what you think.
I mean, I agree with those things, but I would say, again, just trying to think about it differently is that most of the real value comes from across silo. Yep. So like if you're really focused on value, you need somebody that has enterprise level thinking. If you can get a unicorn that has real depth of expertise in process of your business, whether it be development through to global supply chain product launch, but also has a very good understanding of automation up to an enterprise level architecture, then you've hit gold, especially if they've got a bit of drive.
Should I add?
Anything to add?
No, I will add to that in the sense of, I mean, we have this concept in Amazon of the 2 pizza team, and so it does require different role plays, but I do think it's important if you're embarking on a digital transformation that you do have that change agent or that connector type one that can understand how different stakeholders are organized, how decisions are made, how decisions are blocked. I think that is important. Not to mention, and I don't want to kind of simplify how important it is to have the right expertise and the right capabilities.
Question? Yep.
Yes, first of all, thank you for the insights. My question is, how would you measure a successful digital transformation?
That's a good question.
Did your business get to where it needs to be? I think what we're finding, at least in my experience with the customers I work with, is it's not really its own initiative. It needs to be part of where the business is going. And so it's very few organizations that don't require that thinking. And so I think everyone's seeing their industries transform. For those that are in life sciences, I mean, how many times do you ask about how you can create a more personalized experience for your patient? How many times do you get asked to look at ways that we can reduce our operational spend or our inventory levels? Like, all of those are because the business is trying to go somewhere where they're going. So I think ultimately, in my point of view, it's measured by the business.
I mean, I think that's a really interesting question because, it's loaded to heck as a question, right? It's like, I don't want to answer it.
He's taking the better approach.
But what I would say is that if you set out with a value goal, you achieve that value goal, I would separate that from whether you scale or not, right? Because I think sometimes we're a little bit obsessed with scale. Sometimes you shouldn't.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's still successful.
That's
right?
true.
So this world of because that's monolithic, right?
Yep.
We're going to have 20 years and we're going to do each of the sites, and that's not what we're talking about in digital transformation. And so it's a really interesting question. I'm not going to dig a hole any longer.
Yeah. I would suggest that you're never done with digital transformation, so you can never finish. You can never get there. Because it's like continuous improvement. It's when I reach 100%, then I'm done, right? But you're never going to reach 100% because we're human. However, it is important to measure the steps and identify projects that support your digital transformation, so just like Six Sigma, right? What's the first thing people think of Six Sigma or process improvement as a project? Because when they went through their green belt or black belt training, they were told, find a project to, right? But you're never done. So by using it, what I find successful organizations look at it as a journey, and they measure the steps. They have defined steps for each one of the projects or the phases within that digital transformation, knowing that it's a continuous journey.
Yeah, it's an infinity that you may never reach, but you'll still continue.
Yep. Asymptotically approach, but you'll never get there.
That bell curve of that Six Sigma, that bell curve goes,
Other questions? What are the biggest challenges that you're facing when you're dealing with digital transformation? Shout out.
Get enough investments. That's one of the major.
Just having enough investments and to being able to support. Other challenges? Validation is always a project killer. But again, it's an it's a problem that can be easily solved internally. It's not something we need to look at regulators to solve for us. Please, let's not look to regulators to solve our problems, to tell us how to do things. Let's look to regulators to tell us these are the minimum requirements. And the minimum requirement is, does it meet your intended use? They don't know what your intended use is, so therefore they cannot tell you how to. But I'm getting on a soapbox because it's something I'm very passionate about. We look at the outside, at the external organizations to help us, to tell us, to give us permission to, where it's something that is totally within our control. All the regulation says is that it needs to be validated for your intended use. Go look at 210.211 or 820, depending on which regulation you're in. There's some variation of validated for your intended use. What do you intend to use it for? You decide that. And then how do you prove it? You decide that. You need to be it needs to pass the red face test, but you get to decide. Sorry, I'll get off soapbox. Other challenges?
Say consistency with existing usage. So like, okay, I'm the new guy. I don't want to do something so cool and so far ahead that somebody else who's working with this is going to say, I can't manage that, or I don't understand it. So trying to make sure that it's everything you do is manageable by anyone that looks at it.
Yep. Again, I think with examples, and we're talking about it over lunch, how many of you still balance your checkbook with an actual checkbook? Raise your hand. Nobody. Right? And regardless of your age, and there's a pretty good distribution in this room, nobody uses checkbooks. So for our personal life, we're okay with making changes and adjusting. My parents are on Instagram. They're in their 80s. And, they ask their grandchildren, how do I this, how do I that? They're learning. But yet when it comes to our work life, we're too set in our ways to change. So I agree with you 100%. That is a real issue. We need to find a way through overcoming the internal cultural inertia to make that happen. I know we're standing between you and a drink.
Excuse me.
We hope you found the session helpful. If you have any other questions or like to talk to us, please, I know I'll be around during the mingle session. So thank you.